So the subject today is paradise, and there are only 3 texts in the scriptures about it, because the scriptures talk a lot about heaven, but very little about paradise, because paradise is really a Greek subject, and you know how the Hebrews felt about the Greeks. So paradise means Eden in Greek. It means the origin, the the beginning, you are. And heaven is really not beginning and end so much as an up and down kind of thing. So heaven is up there and you have to earn your way, and hell is down there and you can earn your way. And the notion of paradise is just not synonymous. It's different. It's the beginning, the creation, and the destination. So think belly buttons. Are you an innie or an outie? And the outies are up and down, and the innies are just on this continuum. So when we talk about paradise, we often also talk about church. Not just the church as one foundation, but the church as the body of the foundation, and therefore the body of Christ, and therefore the kind of paradise we might be able to hope for on earth, that we redo the creation over and over and over. And I've got a couple confessions to make today about church. I won't take long with them. Most of you know them already. I love-hate church. I love-hate Judson Church. I love-hate church. I love-hate Judson Church. And I love-hate Jesus. I bet I'm not alone. When I first came, the story of coming to Judson, I was shown the beautiful, gorgeous apartment that is the parsonage, only it was under construction. And I couldn't see it. And I'd already told Warren, my partner, that if they really wanted me to come to Judson, I didn't care if it was a kitchenette. I wanted to go, because I love Judson. Because the other story for me with Judson was never having seen the sanctuary, and never knowing a thing about Stanford White, really, or Augustus, St. Gaudens. I spent all of my Judson creation times in Judson House, getting free room, smoking pot, making sure I knew where the exits were, because the building was in such serious disrepair that there were nights I couldn't sleep because I was worried about not being able to get out. I stayed with lots of different friends in the 60s because it was a place that 60s church types went to, and you could come to the village and stay for free. So I thought that was Judson. And when I came the first time to see the sanctuary, it was under complete scaffolding. So I couldn't see it at all. And I figured it had to be beautiful because everybody said it was beautiful, but I couldn't see anything of it. So on both counts, my experience of Judson was kind of a mess, and an ugly mess. And I didn't know the beauty that was hidden underneath it. I didn't know the apartment had 2 floors. I didn't know that it had anything but a yellow ceramic-looking counter that had holes in it, Lori. I didn't know that all 4 of the appliances in the kitchen really didn't work. We had to finally break the washing machine just so we could have a complete redo. So I had this mad, crazy love of Judson House and Louise Green, who was my major hostess during that period, or later in that period. And when I called Louise originally to say, Judson is talking to me about maybe coming to be their pastor, this would be almost 15 years ago now, I said, Louise, what do you think? And she said, run, don't walk. And I trusted her. And I also knew Peter Larman, who was the pastor then, very well. And I said, Peter, what's going on down there? And he said, well, you know, the building is really, we're losing Judson House. And I said, well, that'll kill Judson. You can't be here without Judson House. That was the site of all the fun and all the life and all the artistic fervor. And then I got invited to come, and I did see the sanctuary one other time. I think it was 1994 or something like that, when John Nelson was ordained. And I was invited to be the guest preacher for his ordination. And I came and I walked up the stairs, and on the way up the stairs, honest to God, I picked up trash, because there was trash in the stairs. And I came, and I could tell the place had not been dusted forever. And I was so embarrassed, I felt like going around and dusting for John's ordination. And about 30 people came to the ordination. It was small. And I was just trying to figure out what was going on at Judson, when there was all that life over there, and it was going to disappear, all that life, and I didn't understand what was going on over here. When I came, there was only one working women's bathroom. We had to stand out in line. Then we didn't have gendered bathrooms, gender-free bathrooms, and so if you were female, hers. If you were female, you had to stand in line and wait. And I remember saying to Roland, who was my great advisor at this point, I'm almost done with this part. Roland, the custodian for many, many years, I said, Roland, what are they going to do about the bathrooms? And he said, nothing. Roland, do you mean that? And he said, yep. And that was upsetting. He was wrong, but that was upsetting. And then I said to Arthur Levin, who was sharing space with us then, looks to me like we have a lot of work to do on this building, church, paradise. And Arthur said, yeah, you're never going to afford to do it, Donna. He went on to be president of the Greenwich Village Historical Preservation Society, and he's going to be wrong too. He and Roland can stand up there in heaven and talk to each other about it. So let me just tell you that Paradise had a really funny main building, and it was even worse because it turned out it was built by Stanford White. Interesting pedophile who, Susanna Lassard, whose text we just read, is somebody I know very well because we play tennis together, and we go 6 to 6, 3 sets. I really like her, and she really doesn't like her grandfather. And their entire great-great-grandfather, their entire relationship was around this beauty and then the violence underneath it, or the neglect of relationship underneath it. So if we look back for our story, regardless of my personal history or Stanford White's personal history, I don't even care that he and Augustus St. Gaudens had a very interesting relationship and a long, I said it wrong, the sculptor had a long correspondence that Susanna goes through over and over in her book about him. And they always sign those letters KMA, Kiss My Ass. And it was a delightful correspondence, but they were making money as much as they were making beauty, which is another part of the original story. So consider these texts about paradise in the context of our mixed heritage, our heritage, our beginning in this building. And go back first with me to Jesus on the cross, where he uses, the only time he ever uses the word paradise, and he says to the robber, I will be with you soon in paradise. That action of including the excluded is the most important action of a church. Why is Judson such a good church? Because we include the excluded almost reflexively, no matter what our building state is, how much trash there is or is not on the stairs, that's what we do. Look at this made-up room of cloth around us. Think of the experience of that girl, Donna, coming to Greenwich Village and acting like the skies had opened, the lights had gone on, the stars were up. That's the experience that we have here, regardless of the state of the architect or the sculptor. Because what Jesus did in that one sentence was to tell the robber that he had a place in paradise. Isn't that an interesting thing to do? Why did he bother? He knew he was dying. Why did he care enough about the robber to say, you and me together in paradise? And then the Pauline story. It could be true, it might not, about somebody who was 14 years in the third heaven, wherever that is. Whether in the body or out of the body, I don't know. Implication, you can be in heaven or paradise on earth or not, physically or spiritually. But that there are things there in those stories, those layered stories, those chapter by chapters, in which all that is hidden becomes revealed, so much so that you can't even talk about it. The same way Susanna told the story of her family. So paradise means Eden with a heavenly touch, not an up and down thing, but a continuum. And paradise is the great pure that even Adam and Eve didn't like. This has been going on a long time, to have mixed stories. Even Adam and Eve thought Eden was flawed. So how could we possibly get away with not seeing Judson as flawed or an interesting body for our church? Inside all of these semi-psychoanalytic musings of me and many, I realize that I now know this building from the inside. I'm not surprised when people of the status of Adrian and Benepe or Dean Allison Green, Louise's sister, come here and say, it's the most beautiful building in New York. I'm not surprised when Francis Morone shows up and says, it's a very well put together building. Exactly. If even Adam and Eve thought of Eden as flawed, what's with us trying to make this our perfect home or make it perfect? So in this context, listen to Rebecca Solnit talking about paradise, and she knew that paradise was a Greek concept better than I do. If paradise now arises in hell, it's because it's the suspension of the usual order and the failure of most systems so that we are free to live and act in other ways. What's the biggest failure of most systems? They make most of us, if not all of us, feel like we're an outsider. You don't belong here. The gates of paradise, the gates of heaven, very important to these subjects artistically. You can stand outside the gate, but you can't quite get in. And yet, sometimes, not all the time, sometimes when you come to Judson, you feel like they're going to accept me. They're not going to look at me weird. They're not going to ask me to believe a bunch of stuff or give a lot of money or look good or say everything right. Here, our job as church, in the absence of angels, is to welcome and make the circle broader of the people in paradise. You know, if you really were rational about things, you could probably say that in the very beginning, everybody was included, because there could only be 3 or 4 people plus a snake in paradise. So everybody was in, nobody was out. But even Adam and Eve went out. They made themselves outsiders. And what has happened historically is that paradise has seen more outsiders than not. So what might all these musings on paradise mean to us here now? We might come to enjoy the stewardship of this building. We might think of our current plight with the elevator, etc., and the lighting as normal in paradise instead of abnormal. We might re-ur our story. We might also think of this preposterous president that we have as normal. Sorry. Someone who just came along to take the covers off of American racism, exceptionalism, and self-aggrandizing cruelty, while also being the place of Stonewall and Margaret Sanger and Frederick Douglass and that gorgeous church in Charleston who forgave the robber and said, "Today I'll be with you in paradise." We might do those things. More personally, we might understand paradise as that time when we feel that we're inside the gate, not outsiders. Judson's greatness has to do with its outsider-insider bringing, not the building. Judson builds insiders and does so mostly with people who started out feeling condemned to be outsiders. That's what it did for me and for many. See, you can consider quickly the other solutions for original flaw and original beauty as humanity's true story. You might find them wanting, but here they are quickly. If you ask psychology to resolve the problems in the origins and the beginnings, psychology will say, "Oh, don't personalize it. It's not about you." Rationality says, "Rise above it. Get over it in another way." Spirituality says, "Give it to God or the universe. Non-attach yourself." I find all three, psychology, rationality, and even religion and spirituality, missing. They don't get the point. You still want to be in. You want to be a part of it. The poets, I think, do better. And that's where the Pauline text is so good. Understand, please, the great danger and jeopardy of living in a body or a building. To be embodied, David Orr says, is to know the risk and the jeopardy of living mortal in a body. The risk and the jeopardy of living mortal in a body. Body, body. I might call it just trust your first impressions, or get to know your body and your building from the inside and come to love it also. Amen.